Okay, we are getting started today. First of all, you are currently joining in on our webinar on science-based nutrition and how to read nutrition studies like a pro. So we're excited you've joined us today. Probably many of you helped us decide on this topic because you voted in our survey about what topics that we should offer. So we are grateful for your ideas and voting and putting in input to make sure that we have relevant and interesting topics. So what I want to do first of all is to introduce my co-presenter today. Her name is intern Courtney, and she has joined us. She's a graduate student from UNC Chapel Hill in the School of Public Health doing her registered dietitian training. So she helped to create our presentation and the poll to figure out what our topics should be. So she's going to share some of her insights throughout today's presentation. And so we will get started so that we stay on time. Let's see, let me pull up my slides. Okay, so our topic today is science-based nutrition, and probably a lot of you maybe are interested in this topic because either you're trained somewhat in science or you just have an interest in health. Maybe you like to read studies, or maybe you've just kind of been pulled right and left from the headlines that you read and not really sure what to believe, which is what I find for a lot of my clients. So this is my, yeah, this is what I maybe would title it if I was just kind of joking around. And I have literally wrote a blog post called How to Read Nutrition Headlines Without Losing Your Mind, because sometimes that's how I feel. So it's funny because if you look at this picture, it's the same background, because that's me sitting at my desk. Sometimes like I get an email from somebody who asks, hey, can you look into this for me? And I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so confusing. And if it's confusing for me, and this is my expertise, then I know it has to be confusing for you all. So just in case you're not familiar with me or my training, I always share this up front because as is relevant with our topic for today, you want to make sure that you are getting the most legitimate and science-based information, if that's what you value, from an expert. And so registered dietitians are trained in nutrition. We actually have 4-year degrees in nutrition. Many of us have master's degrees, and we have to go through accredited classes and to be supervised for an internship and pass an exam. And that's how you become a registered dietitian nutritionist. And then I am a board certified specialist in oncology nutrition. So that is an extra specialty that I do have. I have to take an exam every 5 years and pass it to make sure that I am current and up to date on oncology nutrition issues. I do have an MPH from UNC Chapel Hill, and my BS is in biology from NC State. So today's session, this is what we're going to cover, our goals for today. What does science-based nutrition really mean? What should you do before you forward that email or share something on social media? If it's a nutrition headline or any other kind of medical or science-based topic, you really want to make sure that you do some double checking before you hit forward or share, because that will help everyone. Figure out how much research is done before a news reports on the study, and then know the evidence-based nutrition guidelines for cancer risk reduction and survivorship. So first of all, let's do a poll because this is fun. Let me find it. Where do you typically learn about current nutrition information? So I think that you can choose as many of these options as you want. And you can just click on the screen or whatever. So TV or mass media, which would, used to always be TV, but we all watch TV differently. So it could be that you read the websites or whatever, but do you get your current nutrition information from mass media, like kind of major media outlets? Do you get it from social media? So think about like, oh, if your friend shares something, is that kind of where it triggers your mind to look into it? Do you get it from the newspaper, either online or print version? I actually get a printed newspaper on the weekends. So do you get your information from a friend or family sharing it with you? For a lot of my clients who are going through cancer treatment, they find that kind of out of the woodwork, friends and family start giving them, the well-intentioned tips that are not so science-based. Maybe your medical provider, which may or may not be giving you science-based nutrition information. It just depends. Of course, me, okay. I see a lot of you are answering that. That's so nice of you. And then other. So let me end the poll. You've had about a minute and a half, and then I'll share results. Let me share results with you. So I think this is really interesting, the other piece. If you want to type in the Q&A box just what your other source of information is, I'm very curious about that. I think it's awesome that so many of you are followers, so thank you. And thank you for trusting me, and hopefully I live up to those. I try really hard to make sure that I double check all of my information, that I do all the hard work, but we'll talk about today what that really means. Okay, let me close that out. So here is, I'm quoting myself, but I would be willing to bet that most of what you read or hear about nutrition is actually not true. And this is from my personal experience, being an expert in nutrition and then hearing so much about nutrition, either from my clients or just by being a normal person reading things. Most of it is actually not, I would say it may be somewhat true. There may be an element of truth, but it certainly isn't necessarily the strongest evidence or the most science-based. So what is evidence-based medicine? So let me give you another poll question, okay? Have you heard of the term evidence-based science or evidence-based medicine before? Let's kind of see. So far a bunch of yeses. Okay, good. We have some no's. That makes me happy because we're going to define it for you. So hopefully it'll give some people a clearer answer. And some of you who are saying yes, you probably have heard it, but I would guess you might not even know what it really means. And quite honestly, when we were preparing this presentation, it's like, oh yeah, I need to go back and figure out what the definition is. I have my way of explaining it, but the true definition. So here are our results from that poll. Many of you said yes, some of you said no. And so we're going to define that for you right up front to make sure that you have that. All right. So here is our definition. So our dictionary definition of evidence-based medicine is it's an approach to medicine that emphasizes the practical applications of the findings of the best available current research, which is really important because you can read research studies all day long and never read all of them. And some of them are just not really relevant. They're not things that you would apply practically to your daily life. So this, I think, is a great definition, emphasizes the practical application of the best available current research. And then the Oregon Research Institute had a really nice definition as well, a little bit more sciencey or complicated, but a practice rigorously evaluated in experimental evidence, which means, you know, testing, like randomized control trials. It's shown to make a positive, statistically significant difference in important outcomes, which is why we key in on studies or research or experiments rather than using testimonials as a way to kind of make health decisions. And a program that has stood the test of rigorous experimental evaluations means it's shown that it's supported by data. It's not just based on some theory. We want to prove that the theory was actually true. It has been repeatedly tested and is more effective than standard care or an alternative practice. So you want to compare it to, okay, what do we currently usually do? Let's test it to this kind of new way of thinking and see if it's any better. And then it can be reproduced in other settings. That is really, really key, if you ask me, is that one study doesn't tell us anything really. It might be interesting and it might produce further research, but we want to be able to reproduce a finding multiple times in different kinds of settings. So maybe different types of people. Maybe some group of people had cancer, some group of people had diabetes, some group of people had heart disease, or different ethnicities, or different areas of the country or parts of the world. If we can reproduce it in multiple different environments, then we start to get an even better idea of how significant the finding is. So the bottom line, evidence-based means experts from all over have tested the practice and have deemed it the gold standard based on the current available data. So key is that experts here is a plural term. So it's not just one person's opinion. It's like a consensus of multiple experts, not a consensus of just anybody. It's a consensus of multiple experts. And then here's the thing with nutrition. So evidence-based medicine in general can apply to any type of medical treatment. And a lot of times we're, looking at that from a pharmaceutical standpoint of, well, we got to test this medicine, or think about right now we're investigating a vaccine. We need to test it and make sure that it's safe before we put it into, the population at wide. And so they talk about different phases of trials. Nutrition is such a different ballgame. It is not a clear-cut science because it's very difficult to quantify exactly what someone eats and then make connections to diseases, because we all eat such a wide variety of foods. Diseases also have multiple causes. They take years to develop. So it would take a really long time and lots of studies to determine that one thing caused another. So you'll see today we're going to, use some examples, and our theme in our study examples are avocados. The idea that, an avocado could have a significant influence on your health. There's a lot at play there. How many avocados are you going to eat, and what type of health outcome are you looking for? And that's the challenge with nutrition also, is that I might say, well, I want to study avocados. So I'm going to take all of us who are on the call today, I'm going to randomize you. I'm going to put you in 2 different groups. I'm going to tell one of you to eat avocados every day, and I'm going to tell the other group of you to never eat avocados. And what do? Well, the group that I told not to eat avocados is like, well, I kind of like them, so can I have them sometimes? And then the group I told you to eat avocados every day, and I'm going to study you for 20 years, and you're like, I'm so sick of avocados, I never want to eat them again, and you don't. And then the people who I told not to, they start eating them because they like them, and you've ruined the study. And so that is the additional challenge to human studies, and especially around nutrition, is just this piece of, there are so many factors, and it's really difficult to do the research in a way where we get an absolute clear answer that one thing caused another, rather than it just being associated. So what it doesn't mean when something says it's evidence-based, it doesn't mean that it's always 100% correct. So science is always evolving and changing, and I'm sorry, I know that's kind of annoying, but we're all in the process. I think over our lives, we learn new things with time, right? And so science, that's the purpose of science, is to really kind of get down there, do some testing, test the theories, gather the data, and then if we see that something that we thought was true before maybe is showing a little different outcome, we figure that out and we change. And so for people who say, well, dietitians or nutrition experts are always changing their minds, we aren't usually changing our minds, but we are willing to if the data suggests something different. So I think we always hold that a little bit loosely, and sometimes we get blamed for it. So unless something has been proven consistent over a long period of time, you always hold the conclusions loosely and be critical of its claims. And so you just kind of have to have that in your mindset. All right, so I'm going to launch another poll on the next slide. So I'm asking you, of all of these, there'll be multiple choice. Are they evidence-based? Okay, so some of you who have followed me before, let me get it out here. Okay, launch the poll. So those of you who have followed me for a while will know my feelings on Dr. Oz, but I'm not going to tell you anything because I don't want to mess up your voting. So on our screen here, intern Courtney prepared a very lovely smattering of some options. Which of these are evidence-based nutrition resources? Dr. Oz, the New York Times, your friends and family, MyFitnessPal, Healthline, Facebook, Livestrong, your doctor. I get to see the results coming back live, and this is kind of fun. Very interesting what people say. And I won't give you the answer on any of these right away. All right, there's still votes coming in. So I'm going to give you a little bit more time. There are 2 answers that no one has chosen, which is very interesting. I think this is just interesting in itself. All right, I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to show you the results. So Thank goodness, all of you. Thank you for not saying that Dr. Oz is a evidence-based nutrition resource. New York Times, maybe. No one said friends and family, and no one said Facebook. I think that's really interesting. And you're probably pretty wise. I mean, I think Facebook's great for sharing pictures and not so great about sharing evidence-based information across the board. So it sounds like you guys are very skeptical and cautious about that. That's good. MyFitnessPal got 1 vote. Healthline actually got the most votes, and Livestrong got a fair amount of votes. So let's just talk about these real briefly. The bottom line is that it depends. Across all of these, it's going to depend. These are not evidence-based nutrition resources on their own, but they may have some piece of them that would. So like, let's say your family and friends share something with you. It might be evidence-based and it might not, and you don't know. Or the New York Times, one article could be evidence-based and another one might not be. Healthline, you guys voted a lot. I don't know about their, their editorial crew or anything, but we're gonna talk about one of those. Livestrong, you guys voted pretty high, but I would be cautious about Livestrong because Livestrong.org is different from Livestrong.com. So Livestrong.org is the nonprofit that's a sort of cancer education and survivorship. But Livestrong.com, which is where most people find health information from Livestrong, is actually a for-profit arm. And it's basically just there to make money. And so they hire people to write things. And I wouldn't consider them a great source of information. So I would be cautious about that because how would you know the difference between the two? But really Livestrong.com, which is where most of those health articles come out of, it's just kind of a clickbait profit-making website. Okay. So what are evidence-based nutrition resources or sources of information? Of course, look, my lovely face, dietitians. But again, it's the same thing as other healthcare providers. You need to double check. Like you should be able to double check on my articles and find the research and dig in and make sure that what I'm saying about something is actually true. There are some dietitians that I would argue might not be so science-based. So just because they've gone through the training doesn't mean that they practice that way. American Institute for Cancer Research, I do talk about a lot. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans is another, it's an expert source for information. American Cancer Society puts together guidelines, the National Cancer Institute, and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is our sort of governing organization, professional group as dietitians. All right, so of course, all kinds of headlines, right? Here's a few examples which are really interesting. Time, all types of publications will cover it. Of course, some publications are a little bit more reliable than others, but just because it's a more mainstream publication does not necessarily mean that they're relying on evidence-based nutrition information. And so you have to do that kind of hard work of digging in. But these are some really interesting headlines. And these are our tips. So signs of a bad article. Does it make sensational claims from only one study? If you can't find any details about the study, if it's clickbait, which I always see this thing on the right side of my, Google form, and it's like, never eat this one food, and it's always a banana turning brown. I never click on it because I don't want to give them that satisfaction. But if it's like trying to really entice you to click on it, that's what we call clickbait. If a claim is not specific enough, so if it just claims, oh, it's good for cancer, that's really broad. There's a lot of different types of cancer. Anything which sounds too good to be true probably is. So here's some examples. Avocados can cure cancer, and this is going to be our case study today. Sugar causes cancer. That's one of those myths that really makes it around a lot, and it's like a clickbait thing. Want to lose weight? Drink leftover potato water. That was literally in that last slide. It's crazy. So signs of a good article, references and links will be provided. You will be able to dig in and find that actual article. The study population will be detailed. It will have multiple studies and references, not just one. It will state the limitations of the study, and it would be published in a reputable news source, author, or journal that has a peer review editing system. So ultimate tip here, use your common sense. Something doesn't seem right, probably not. So this is our criteria for evaluating those news studies. Criteria, look at the title, see if it's sensationalized or not, look at the claims, the references, credentials of the author, And if there's any conflict of interest, because if they're getting a kickback from the article, that's, you know, kind of giving you a sign that they might not be unbiased. Okay, so this is going to be, intern Courtney is going to talk about these 3 web articles. So I am going to paste them in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and mute myself so that Courtney can talk about these 3 articles, but I will put them in the chat so you can look them up if you want to, but realize these are case studies. They're not necessarily us saying that they're good sources of information.
Thanks, Julie. You wanted my video off during this, right?
Yeah, just to save bandwidth.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Courtney. We previously met, but if you weren't here at the very beginning of the webinar, I'm here, Julie, finishing up my RD advanced nutrition hours with her, as you've probably seen if you've seen her other interns. And today we're going to go over an article about this idea about avocado relating to cancer, because it seems to be something that is talked about at least a lot on some stream articles. I have Huffington Post and Healthline included in here, but not necessarily represented in the research well. So I felt like it was a good example of that, of just kind of something where people talk about it a lot, but isn't necessarily well evidence-based, quote, or we're going to figure this evidence and how to decipher that in different media sources. So I'm going to do, since many people use Healthline from that poll, I'm going to do that one first, because it could be the one that a lot of people are familiar with. So let's try to share my screen. And Julie's going to post a link in the chat. So pull that up so y'all can go over it yourselves. But I'm going to go over it on PDF form, first of all, to make sure that my internet is good. And also because I've highlighted things and put notes in there already, so that can be easier for people to follow on their own. And again, feel free to put questions in the chat, and Julie or I will see them. So Julie, just making sure everyone can see my screen right now.
Looks good to me.
Okay, cool. So this is the Healthline article, which again, if you pull it up, this is just the PDF version of it. And I also included on the body criteria table, and I will reference it. So just, I'm going to have that in the corner so that people can keep those in mind as I'm going through what I'm looking for. So again, first we're looking at the title. This one we like better than other ones because it's a question: avocado breast cancer fighter. So it's not necessarily trying to convince you one way or another saying, oh, it definitely is, it definitely isn't. Because again, we don't know that. The evidence doesn't prove that yet. And they're just going at the evidence and trying to possibly point in one direction. So that's, we like that title better than other ones. So then we see medically reviewed by a RD, Natalie Butler, and written by someone else. So that means that they have a peer review system where someone writes something or does the research, and then it's reviewed by someone with credentials. So we like that as well. So there's people looking at this and someone who might have a nutrition background. Again, you'd have to do more, detailed research to see who this person is. Like, it's just written as an RD, like if she actually does and all of that. But for the sake of this exercise, let's just say she does. So we like that as well. We see already in the overview that it just about how cancer comes from multiple places and it can never be caused by one food or one thing, and vice versa. One food or one thing is not going to cure cancer. Kind of that out of the way at the beginning. And so we also like that because it's giving you a lens of this is the current research, but this is not going to cure your cancer, prevent your cancer. It's just talking about what the latest research is talking about. And then we see that they have a quote from someone who's an oncologist, which again, not necessarily someone who has nutrition credentials, but is someone who's possibly expert in the field. And again, they include the link so you can go see who this Michelle person is. But what we like to see is that they're trying to include the perspective of multiple people. So this is a naturopathic person. They're going to have a different perspective than someone else. So again, so we like to see this article has, sorry.
Let me just jump in on that really fast. So her credentials, ND. ND is a naturopathic doctor, which is not the same as a medical doctor. So like oncologist would be an MD or a DO, and then they would have their oncology training. Whereas an ND, naturopathic doctors go to a completely different sort of system of medical training. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke. Oncology provider, not oncologist. Thank you for that. Yeah, so it's important that her that she is naturopathic doctor and not an MD or DO, and that's important. But I feel like, again, I haven't clicked on this link. I need to, and who knows, could be fake. But that they do try, I guess, maybe to put some transparency in there. So then I just have my notes in there. Like I said, they try to cite people as an RD, just generally mentions that avocados are healthy foods, which is all things that we know. And then they're going to go into more detail about that. Again, one of the articles they reference or research they reference here is we have on, I'm going to go to the PowerPoint. Julie has it that looks up that reference, and it's not actually that relevant to cancer, which is interesting. And we wanted to show that. So this is the article they have referenced. So again, this article is about avocado being a cancer fighter. And this article they have referenced is about the California Hass avocado and about its nutrient profile and how to grow it. So that's not necessarily that good of a reference to have. So that's, again, something you want to be critical about. Like they have a quote research article referenced, and it 2009, so it's not even within the last 5 years, about avocados profile, not necessarily about a research study that happened about cancer in avocados. So we don't necessarily we would really consider that to be a point in their table about being evidence-based. We'll keep in mind. Let me go back to the other one. But again, they do have the link, so they don't just make a random they do. You can find your own, which is something in general we do like, so that you can make your own choices. Okay, let me see, the last thing I wanted to mention. Include the limitations of the studies, which we do like, basically saying that there's no to date which links avocados to breast cancer reduction. And they do talk about and have a link about the Mediterranean diet, which is something that is well studied, which avocados would be included in relating to cancer risk reduction, but not necessarily, quote, cancer cure. And so that's also important. One having here, as it's a general rule of thumb, is that a lot of study compounds are usually laboratory tests of chemical compounds, something you see in a supplement or a prescription on cancer cells that might come from mice. And that's very different than an epidemiological study, which is like a study of people over time, avocado consumption. So whenever you're looking at studies, which we will later, keep that in mind as well. So you can see later on your own in this article, it has different vitamins and things that are in avocados and includes different studies as well about those specific compounds and cancer. So to general takeaway is that there isn't really anything conclusive right now, and that healthy diet is always the best course of action with cancer. We all, if you didn't know, check out Julie for more information on that, because that is definitely something. So let me get this smaller. So overall, we give health, A- B+ range, just based on, they try to, in their own way, they try to present the evidence to you. Again, this is a question, not a claim, not too sensational, and includes limitations of studies, has many, and they do try to cite them. It is an RD, and that there's no conflict of interest that can be seen, other than the fact that when you click on the website, they do make money off of it. Okay, so another example, go over here, is Huffington Post, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And that should be, let me double check. I think Julie, you put the link in for that one, right?
Yeah, I put all three in the chat.
All of them. Okay, so this is the Huffington Post one. So avocado is a super cancer fighting food. So again, if we're looking at the title criteria, that's already telling you what you should think. And that is automatic flag in Julie's mind, because that usually indicates that people they don't necessarily want the whole article, or you don't even have to read the whole article, just share. And that's the answer, is that avocados are a super cancer fighting food. And as we're covering, you know that. That's a really generic phrase as well. Cancer fighting food, like what kind of cancer, like fighting what specifically, no one really knows. So the title automatically kind of tells you that this might be the best choice. So also we want to point out again their credentials. This is an MD, I guess, or a DO. We don't really know. And they have their own cancer website. Looks like they have some cancer programming. I didn't go into deep detail and look them up, but I can already tell that they're obviously going to have their own perspective, and they're going to have their own, I think, conflicts of interest, because they want you to go on their website and they want you to possibly participate in their program. And they aren't necessarily like a cancer researcher at an institute or a university where this is like their profession, and they're, you know, trained on to give objective research.
I kind of question, like, I would question if that's actually a medical doctor or if she is a PhD in something that, who knows where she got her PhD. Because then, you know, you can have a PhD and call yourself a doctor, and you can get a PhD from an online university and call yourself a doctor, and then people can't tell.
Yeah, like they're even, you can get a PhD, like she could have a PhD in physics, like we have no idea. Also, even like MDs and DOs, like there'll be people, I'll see books that have MDs and DOs on it, like on there, and I'll look in the back and like they're like let's say they're doing something on cancer, and like their whole residency and medical practice was like a podiatrist. I'm like, why do you have the expertise to talk about cancer? So I've definitely seen that before. Like they think just because they have an MD, they can talk about things. So that's a really good point. We'd like to look at the date as well. So this is relatively dated. So even if the studies they do mention are peer reviewed and all of that, they would be before 2011. And like in seminal research in nutrition, since it's a really fast growing field, we want things within the last 5 years if possible. So again, this is going to be old information. And then also Huffington Post has this little disclaimer saying that they don't review their work, that it's just the contributor controls and posts freely to their site. So this could just be this person advertising something that helps them with their website. So just all things to keep in mind. And I have this all written here, and we're going to these tools to you later. So feel free, you don't have to read it now, but I just like to have my ideas written down before I go through this. And you can do the same. This too as well, to download these PDFs, just do print to PDF on these websites and on studies, and you can go through and just write in and highlight. I'm more of a writing and piece of paper kind of person, so it helps me think things through. So again, we have some similar claims that avocados have a lot of nutrients, a lot of antioxidants, phytochemicals, a lot of things in the last article. Talking about the various nutrients that are in avocados, which are all things we do know. We do know avocados have these nutrients, they have been studied. And then relating those nutrients to cancer prevention and possibly, so cancer risk reduction, but also cancer treatment. And they do mention some studies, but they have, don't necessarily go to these, they go to things about these vitamins. So again, we have no idea what these studies are talking about or where they're getting this 43% or any of these data from. And I have included in my notes. And again, also important to note that studies that just mention nutrients aren't necessarily supplements. So there are a lot of times studies that are just using like a nutrient like lutein, vitamin E, or certain carotenoids on cancer cells, like on lung cells or cancer cells, taken from mice a lot of the times, and just seeing how they react. So again, that's not necessarily the same of what happens when people consume avocados over their whole life. So that's important to note. This is the only study I could see here with in-text citations. That means like right next to what they're mentioning. It actually takes you to, that actually gives you the author name and the journal and all of that, but you can see it's from 1996. So that's not really, again, going to be that helpful, be useful. I haven't read that study. Some studies that are older are seminal studies that really like change the field a lot, but it isn't necessarily you're going to want to a lot of ideas off of in the year 2020, when there's been a massive amount of cancer and nutrition research done in a very short time period. So I think I've done most of the comments, and this one does have a reference sheet, but again, you can see 1999, and a lot of the studies are old, but around time as well. So again, not really the most recent studies, which is what is mentioned in that evidence-based definition that Julie had, which is that you want the most up-to-date research. So again, in our criteria page, we give Huffington Post a C because the title is slightly sensational. Have general ideas that avocados are healthy. That's pretty much the only claim they can support in it. Has some links and references, but not cited well next to the statistics, and all that they're really old. Hard to tell their credentials and could have possible conflicts of interest. Okay, I'm going to go to the last one. And this one I'm going to go through relatively quickly because I feel like after covering certain points, it'll be obvious to all of you that this one is not evidence-based, because definitely fail our criteria test. So this one's Juicing for Life. It's just some blog that someone had, relatively recent, 2018. So, we like to see that. The title is, You've Been Throwing Away Your Avocado Seeds Because No One Told You They Fight Cancer. So you can already tell that that title is kind of ridiculous. Like, first off, generally makes a claim that seeds can be eaten, which isn't necessarily something that we know, and doesn't have a reference, because as far as I think Julie and I know, it's possibly poisonous. So that's concerning that they're recommending that. And then general, right off the bat, they make these claims that the seed has in fleshy fruit, and then it has more antioxidants than like everything, and also has more soluble fiber than anything. So right away, there's no references to those claims, and they're really overarching and generic. And that's what I have in my notes as well, which again, I'll share this. So this is the oldest they have, which I didn't realize this when I found this, but it's actually the Huffington Post article that I just showed you. And that's the only reference they have other than this place that they possibly get kickbacks from. And we just went through the Huffington Post article. We gave it a C, not very evidence-based. So, and then they're using it as their quote primary source of evidence, which makes it even worse. So the same things that we saw in the other ones, they mentioned studies are kind of old. Did not have idea where these studies are coming from. It probably could be very difficult for you to find these if you don't know the title or the authors or anything about it. And the same thing, they make really generic claims: kills cancer cells, strengthens the immune system, heals digestive issues. Those are super generic. You can't really back those up. They're not talking about any specific diseases in here. We don't know what. And that's what I have in my notes as well. And then I teach you about avocado seeds, which is something, again, I don't even know what to do with. There's this place called Real Pharmacy, which they have an asterisk on the website. Oh, I think I'm sharing it for some reason. I don't know why. Hold on, sorry. I can actually just go to the PowerPoint. I'm not sure why that happened. Where's that criteria?
I can pull it up because I need to share it anyway.
No. Okay. Yeah, it shut itself off for some reason, but I got it back. So in the Juicing for Health one, we can see the type of sensation, know where their claims are coming from, and they're super generic. There's not evidence-based references. There's no degree the woman is a wellness coach. If you see on the last, some certificate online that I'm not even sure what that is. And then conflicts of interest, I was going to say that Real Pharmacy website, she indicates that she gets some kickbacks from some products that are that's sold on that website. She could definitely get kickbacks from that. So we fail that article.
We fail it. I feel like we were really nice to the Huffington Post with a C.
Yeah.
I feel like they might have failed too, pretty much. It was slightly better than the Juicing for Health. So yeah, I think it's an important point that Courtney made about the conflict of interest, and that the link went to probably purchase something. Probably the link would go to that Real Pharmacy thing, and they maybe sell like an avocado seed extract to you. And to be honest, most of those websites, they're just written by marketing people who are trying to sell, they're just trying to make money off of these referral links. And so for the most part, websites themselves, if they don't link articles and they don't have any other kind of information about science, they're just a sales point. Like that's all they are, is a salesperson. All right, awesome.
Yeah, I could definitely see her being that. Okay, I'm gonna edit my screen share. Okay, there you go.
The next piece of this is best practice deciphering evidence right from the source. So that would be like if you dig in, let's say the article at Healthline that we kind of gave an A-, you would of course click on the link that says, oh, these researchers from UCLA found that avocados blah 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 with prostate cancer or whatever it was. You would click on it. Before you do anything else, you want to check their references and you would get directly to the source. So these are the things that you want to look for when you're evaluating journal articles. They are not as pretty, I will say that. So you're basically just reading text about a research study. It can be very thick and cerebral. And a lot of times you're like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But really for our purposes, I think that if you can read, like number 5 on here is read the abstract, the limitations, and the conclusion. So for those of us, you know, who are just skimming it, or who aren't trained necessarily scientifically, you don't need to read all the details of the research study, how it was designed, what the p-values were, and all of these kind of statistical language. But it is important that you read the abstract and ask these key questions. Where was it done and by whom? What are the details of the population? And by population, you need to figure out what are they studying. When they say things like cell lines, they're not studying people. They are studying cells in a petri dish. So it's really important, you know, you can't apply research findings from cells in a petri dish to you as a human being because our bodies don't function like petri dishes. So it's just completely irrelevant. So you do need to dig into that. Find the details of who or what is being studied. What are the details on the nutrient or the food? Are they actually studying food intake, or are they just taking an extract of a piece of the food or one component of the food and studying it? And then what were they actually trying to answer in this study? Were their methods appropriate for that question? So I always look at that too in the you know, the research study for Healthline that Courtney mentioned. When you look at it and you pick up the study that they cited, that study didn't have anything to do with cancer. So it's completely irrelevant. So wait, what was our bottom line? I missed it. Oh, read the abstract. So there you go. A lot of times you can get the conclusion in the bottom line of the abstract and you don't even have to scroll down, but definitely you need to pull back and read it. So we wanted to show you some journal articles. I don't think we have time to go through all 3 of them. And just to stick with our theme of avocados, Courtney found 3 studies that were done on avocados. Courtney, do you just you want me to scroll through these slides as you talk through the first one?
Yeah, I was just saying I could just do the middle one and I could just go through that one and then mention the differences to the other 2. So that's yes, I think it's that one. Do you want me to screen share or just keep it on this?
If it works to stay on here, it might be the easiest.
Let's see. What's the next slide? Do you have the conclusion slide? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so actually just go back to the other one just so we can briefly talk about the differences, and then I'll cover this one more until. Sorry. So what Julie and I are talking about, this one, Journal of King Saud University, like we have no idea what that is. Neither of us have ever heard of that. So that's right off the topic. You just like with the headlines, you want to look at what journals they are and if you've heard of them. So for cancer and for nutrition, a lot of times you like JAMA, we like Science, we like Nature, those like the top of the line journals. Also like Academy of Nutrition Dietetics Journal has their own journal. Journal of American Nutrition, like that, are what you're going to be looking for. So that doesn't necessarily mean the study wasn't good per se, and it could have been well done and all of that. But it's just a more strict peer review process, the higher in the tier of journals you get to. So this one, I'm going to go to the middle one, but I just wanted to include the title of that. Thanks, Julie. So the middle one is from Journal of Food Science, which is one I actually kind of know because I was a food science major in undergrad, fun fact. But again, right off the bat, you're like, this is not nutrition, cancer, health, medicine related journal. So that is something to keep in mind, that that isn't necessarily their primary area of expertise. That isn't their primary goal in this research, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So again, keeping that in mind, you can already see from the title, antioxidant cancer inhibitory activity of colored avocado seed extract. So these food scientists are looking at this extract from the avocado seed, which is covered in that, you know, Juicing for Life, great article we read. And they're looking at the antioxidant activity and cancer inhibitory activity. So right already tells you this is probably not happening in humans. This might not even be happening in an actual like whole creature. It could just be cells taken from something, which, as if you read the article, is in fact just cells taken from. I didn't find if it was mice or humans or not. We don't even know. And like the activity of the case of this avocado seed extract with the different types of cancer cells. So they do cover different types of cancer cells, which is, you know, what you want to look at when it just says cancer activity rather than a specific like breast cancer, prostate, whatever. And the main point that they keep abstract is that it has high polyphenol content. And if any of you have learned about polyphenols, it's something in wine, it's in grapes, it's in a lot of different things, and it's a potent antioxidant. So that's what they're studying, and that's good. That's something that is proven by science, and we do know that polyphenols are strong antioxidants. But if you go to the conclusion, you learn that the reason why they want this antioxidant property is that it's really good as a natural colorant because antioxidants are helpful preserving food. You know, a big thing in food science right now, because it's a really recent article, 2008, 2019, is having natural additives rather than the chemical ones, because people like to see that in their labels. So this is studying antioxidant properties for food additives. So that's not to say that it necessarily doesn't have possibilities for human consumption, and they do include it, say it could have a role with functional food additives, so like, or it could be a source of anti-cancer compounds or a possible future supplement, but that's not the point of the study. It was for natural colorant and antioxidant for food additives. And again, they mentioned with eliminating in a cell culture and not inside a mouse, like a whole body, and not inside a human or anything like that. So this is like just an example, just reading the title and the conclusion, you can pretty much, you know, figure out what this article is talking about. And if you saw this being referenced in like a Huffington Post article or something saying that avocado seed extract is anti-cancer, and you go to this and you're like, well, they don't know that. This is their theory. This is what they think from this study about it being an additive. It could have that area. And that's kind of how science talks to each other. And I think that's one of the many things of between journal articles and mass media, which is confusing, is that journal articles like this are for experts in the field to talk to one another and be like, hey, we found this in this study, and this is where we think the research should go. This is the direction. So they're not making claims in this. They're saying, hey, if you are a food scientist and do this and you know cancer people, this is what we think from our research, and we think this is a good direction. I think that's one of the many discrepancies between mass media reads these studies and how science works. They're just trying to talk to each other and be like, hey, this is a cool thing we found. And some people are like, oh my God, this is like 100% a thing. Like, this is the answer. And it's not necessarily true at all. And the only reason I wanted to include the other one is just to give you an example of a systematic review, which is the gold standard of journals. And I'm not going to go through it for the sake of time, but just to give you an example, a systematic review and analysis is a group of experts use a very strict criteria of including and excluding articles, and then trying to make overarching conclusions from it about a certain question. So this one's about cardioprotective effect of avocado. So that is, and again, Journal of Food Properties, I'm not going to go into this for the sake of time, but are looking for journal studies if you're using Google Scholar or something else like that. If you can find a systematic review on what you're trying to answer, that's the best call. Find it on avocado and cancer. I could not find it, which makes me think, again, there's not enough research to even do a systematic review on it. So if that doesn't show you that there isn't really an evidence base to the question, I don't know.
Thanks. So yeah, those were pretty interesting, I think. Just to go through, if you see something that says in vitro, that means cells and petri dishes, and it's really not applicable. So if say you read this headline, you were like, I'm going to dig into their references. If they have them, they have references, great. You go into the reference, you find out that it's from a study that was done in a petri dish, you can just write it off. You don't need to believe it. But you know, it usually, I interviewed a cancer survivor once who was pretty savvy. And he's like, yeah, people just send me stuff all the time. And he's like, usually it takes less than 5 minutes to figure out that what they sent me wasn't legitimate. So that's to say, my reminder to you, and just to keep in your mind, is that a research study does not equal evidence-based recommendations. Evidence-based recommendations are much stronger than any one research study. And evidence-based recommendations, like Courtney was talking about, a review or a meta-analysis. And so that's even like middle ground here. So I would say evidence-based recommendations is even stronger than a review or a meta-analysis, which is even stronger than any one study. And so there's levels of strength of scientific evidence. But this is kind of one of my favorite ways to understand why we bother with evidence-based recommendations. And the reason that we do is because it optimizes your decision-making. If you're like me and sometimes you're completely overwhelmed by the mass of information that is coming at you, when it comes to nutrition information, if you sort of hang your hat or focus your energies on the evidence-based recommendations, it will help to make your decision-making about what you include in your diet or what you bother reading. It makes that decision-making a lot easier. So all medicine based on science has some degree of credibility, but evidence-based medicine really goes to that next level. It emphasizes well-designed and well-conducted research, so they're not going to waste their time reviewing studies that aren't well done. And so these are like really smart scientists that all get together and they kind of use their brain power together. And they say, let's look at all the studies that have been done on any one topic, and let's just eliminate the ones that aren't any good, and then look at the ones that were really well done and rank them. So what they do is they rank the evidence by strength. And then they require that only the strongest types of evidence can yield recommendations, and that weaker types can only yield weak recommendations or maybe more information as to what to study next. Stronger science comes from meta-analysis. We told you as a review. It could be a systematic review. It could be a randomized control trial. Weaker science comes from observational studies, case control studies, and those petri dish studies in cells. And to be honest, most of the headlines around nutrition come from this weaker science category. And evidence-based recommendations are coming from the stronger science category. So by keying in on what's the strongest science and focusing in on evidence-based recommendations, it helps you to make just your day-to-day decisions much easier and not have to worry about all the latest things that have come out. So I wanted to make sure that by the end of our session that you did know what the evidence-based recommendations are for cancer risk reduction. And so it's really important to me that you know, and I have many oncology colleagues who aren't experts in nutrition who are not aware. I'm pretty sure they're not aware there are evidence-based guidelines on nutrition for cancer risk reduction and survivorship. So these are the recommendations. First of all, I put right up front that there is an evidence-based recommendation that after a cancer diagnosis, you should follow that's the AICR's recommendations if you can. Of course, there's some limitations, and those recommendations are, and if you need me to talk more about it, you got to watch one of my other webinars. But eat a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans, limit consumption of fast foods, limit consumptions of red and processed meat, limit consumption of sugar-sweetened drinks, limit alcohol consumption. You do not need to use supplements for cancer prevention or survivorship. You should aim to meet needs through diet alone. be physically active, and be at a healthy weight. You'll notice there's no line item here about avocados or blueberries or kale or any one food. And so when you look at these evidence-based guidelines, they're really looking at more of a pattern of eating, and that there's not consistent evidence showing that there's any one food that's going to do it for you. So these are kind of my conclusions around looking at research studies or reading headlines, really. So in order for you to read a headline around nutrition and not be, kind of afraid or concerned or believe it, you can follow these 4 steps. First of all, look past the headline. The headline pretty much means nothing. I like Courtney's, comment about if it's a question, does it pose a question or does it tell you what to think? I don't like it when they just tell you what the answer is, because we know that's probably not true. So look past the headline. Do not forward an email or share a social media post if you haven't actually read it, please, for the sake of humankind. Number 2, do not follow news or social media outlets that do not vet the information. I think that means that Huffington Post should not be a place that you go to for any kind of information, okay? Unless your friend wrote an article and you're interested in it. Number 3, when you read the news article, you have got to dig into the details. You've got to dig down and find the study, and then find out, when you're reading that study, find out if it was done in humans. And those things, if you do those 4 steps, you're going to eliminate most of those headlines that you don't even have to worry about. All right, so just as a wrap up, this is my nutrition philosophy, and I think it helps bring you back kind of to the core of what's really important. So that you don't get swayed right and left by this headline or that headline. So first of all, no single food or food substance can prevent or cure cancer. We also know there's no single food or food substance that's going to cause cancer. So the evidence largely says it's a pattern of eating that can promote health. It's not any one food item. But we do know a combination of foods consumed in a mostly plant-based diet plays an important role in promoting health. So if you want to eat meat, you can. Your body prefers nutrients in food, not pills. That's, that was almost exactly what they said in that evidence-based guideline, is to aim to get nutrition from food if possible. Certainly there are some exceptions when you need to take it in pill, powder, nutrition supplement form, but for the most part, this is what we aim for. Every time you eat, see it as an opportunity to promote your health rather than thinking about all the things that you shouldn't have or that's bad for you. I really prefer that you look at food as a way to nourish your body, and thinking about, oh, okay, what about my meal is nourishing to me? Always remembering that you don't have to be perfect and that you should have room to enjoy life. Okay, so the purpose of having good health or eating healthy so that you can enjoy good health is so that you enjoy life. So don't choose a way of eating that's reducing your quality of life, or don't choose a way of consuming nutrition information that's reducing your quality of life, stressing you out, making you eliminate foods that you love. I think that sometimes people get caught up in a trap and they read everything and they believe everything they read, and that leads them to eliminating a lot of the foods that really that they enjoy. So you don't have to have a perfect diet, you just have to have a pretty good diet. So my bottom line always is to keep calm and eat your vegetables. You can connect with me online if you haven't already, although at least 50% of you, I'm your source of nutrition information. So you're already connected, and I'm thankful for that. I always love getting your emails, your comments, your questions. I appreciate that. You can join me on the Cancer Dietitian podcast. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. Of course, you can share my things on Facebook, but you should double check me, because that's just due diligence. That's important for everyone to do. And then I do have a suggested reading slide. So for everybody who's registered for this webinar, we're going to do a follow-up email. We'll send out intern Courtney's notes so you can review those. We'll send out these suggested reading links. So the Nutrition Research and Mass Media article by Harvard is really helpful. The AICR's 10 cancer prevention recommendations, the American Cancer Society's guidelines for diet and physical activity for cancer prevention. And when we say prevention, it really means risk reduction. National Cancer Institute, they had really interesting, it was an overall cancer risk reduction topic, but they had an interesting section about diet. And then I've written Back to Basics, the Cancer Dietitian Nutrition Philosophy, which I quickly ran over, and then How to Read Nutrition Headlines, or Nutrition News Without Losing Your Mind. Those are the Cliff Notes versions. So let's see. How to get on YouTube? Somebody is asking. Oh, for the recorded webinar, yes, we're live on YouTube now. It'll be recorded and then I'll put it on cancerdietitian.com probably today or tomorrow, and I'll send that out by email. So hopefully you're already on my email list. If you're not on my email list, you can go to cancerdietitian.com and just sign up where it says, do you want, evidence-based information, sign up, or just send me an email. But I have a YouTube channel. If you're on cancerdietitian.com, you can go to the link for YouTube and it'll take you over to my YouTube channel. And then it has all of my recordings there. So there might be some other ones. What else? Any other questions for people who are on today? All right. If there's no other questions, of course, you can always email me afterwards, but we really appreciate you being with us today. Thanks for inspiring our topic. We hope that it's been helpful, and we would love for you to, connect with us later and let us know of anything else. So send us emails, and I look forward to seeing you in my next session. Thanks so much. Bye.